Welcome to the Celebrating Women podcast, co-hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher, a podcast that celebrates women, their issues, their thoughts, their lives, conversations that celebrate their gifts, their talents, their courage. It's the Celebrating Women podcast. Presented by Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Hey, it's Mandee Montana, and you know I love to relax, right? I love telling you all about the incredible staff at Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler. This time, I want to tell you about Christian. Recently, I scheduled a dual service day with massage and facial. Pro tip, schedule a massage before the facial. And when I was there, I shared with Christian that I have redness in my skin. So he recommended that we do the CBD Amber Light facial. It was amazing. It totally reduced the redness, and my skin felt so juicy and hydrated. I highly recommend it if you also deal with redness flare-ups in your skin. He even shared the mask with me that he used so I can use it at home in between my facial treatments. I'm excited to include this in my skincare routine and get spa-like results at home. If you've never done a dual service day, it's time. You're worth it. Schedule your next massage or facial or both now by visiting Hand & Stone Massage and Facial Spa, located in the Cumberland Shopping Center in Tyler, or book online at handandstonetyler.com.
Welcome back to the Celebrating Women podcast. I'm Ashley Fisher.
I'm Mandee Montana.
And we are in the studio, just Mandee and I this morning, another early morning, but we both have coffee this time. And we're going to get into a topic that is a little meaty, a little, I wouldn't say necessarily heavy, but it's an interesting one that really anyone can relate to. We're going to talk about communication.
Okay, so communication could be meaty, could be heavy. It can also be fun and lighthearted and loving. Mm-hmm. And communication can be all the things.
All the things.
But if you don't communicate, you can create a lot of problems.
Really and truly, I think it's the absence of communication where the heaviness will come. Mm-hmm. Because you can have a heavy conversation with someone, but it bring levity and bring relief once mm-hmm. it's done. There's a lot of like buildup and anticipation having a really big conversation, but everybody is typically always the better for it. Mm-hmm. One thing that my oldest son likes to do with me is we like to watch funny Instagram videos.
Yeah.
And there was one that we came across, and it was this guy talking about how he discusses emotions with children, with his kids, and he relates it to, I'm so sorry, he relates it to farts.
Okay.
And he said, your feelings are like farts. If you keep them in, it'll cause pain. And if you hold them in too long, it'll create a mess.
So I told you it could be funny, right? Communication can be funny. Here we go.
But I mean, I was like, you know what? That's gross, but it's so true.
It is true.
I mean, I think we have all had something in life where, you know, we hold on to something and it just sits there, and then we stew in it, and it just makes us feel cruddy. Mm-hmm. And then when we finally have the conversation, that relief is like, oh, you know. Mm-hmm. But specifically, I think what's really interesting in like our society and our world today is this juxtaposition between how much we over communicate on social media to the point where, you know, ever since the inception of Facebook, it's, oh, I'm headed to the grocery store, and then I'm going to go potty, and then I'm going to go to work. It's like, we didn't need to know that.
The status update.
The status update.
That's a little too real.
Or when people will go and they'll just spill their guts, or like airing out drama mm-hmm. on a Facebook post or an Instagram post or an Instagram story. So just that this over communication that happens on social media versus when people get in a room together, I feel like now people have a much harder time communicating face to face.
Yeah, and not on FaceTime.
Right.
Which I feel like most of our audience has been around a bit longer, so they've done the actual face to face probably for a while, mm-hmm. And FaceTime is a newer thing for us. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like in a room together like you and I are. A lot of podcasts do
or virtual, which we could have done that too. And we talked about potentially doing it at one point, like on a Zoom or something where we didn't necessarily have to meet and be in the same room. But there's something really special about being here in the room together, where at any given moment, either one of us could get up and give each other a hug.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you on the fact that people like broadcast on social media things that aren't really necessary to be broadcast.
Yeah.
And will put it there instead of having a face-to-face conversation with the person that they need to have that conversation with, because it puts you in a vulnerable position.
Very much so. Yeah.
I mean, that's, I think, where the face-to-face is hard sometimes is you're vulnerable to not only could somebody hug you, but somebody might get hit you, depending on the context or how difficult the conversation is. But I think there's an interesting line, too, of holding it in and allowing it to hurt you and sitting with it a minute to not overreact.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
that's a skill.
I find myself struggling with sitting with it too long sometimes whenever I need to say something to somebody. Like my initial reaction is don't overreact. Sit with it for a minute and wrap your head around the best way to handle this. But then sometimes I sit with it for too long and it starts to fester. And so I think we all have a different line there with what that is for as individuals, but trying to find it, I think, is a worthy pursuit.
I think so. And this is where, we talked off mic, like we are not an authority on communication at all. But, like anybody, we have times where we've had superb communication and then times where it just totally fell flat. I guess on social media, first of all, we all know how good it feels to type that thing out. Like there are many times if I'm upset, I'll go into my notes and I'll type something and it'll help get it out of me and it'll help me to like express it. But then Lord knows I ain't gonna post it.
Girl, I've got some Google Docs that have some letters to people that I will never send. They weren't meant to be sent, but it's just an opportunity for me to release some heavy emotions and some frustration
which I think is super healthy.
Yeah.
Very healthy. I think the problem is that when we write that thing and then we go so far as to post it, I would love to see if there's like stats on this, but I highly doubt it ever has the impact that we would like for it to. When people make passive aggressive posts and they just want to like, maybe they don't name names, but they just want to stick it to somebody because they're upset or they're hurt or whatever. I would wager that 9.5 times out of 10, it doesn't have the impact that they would like it to, and it's not a good look. I understand it. I understand like being so enraged or upset or just being so justice oriented that you want to just like spill it, because it does feel good to say it. But that always just strikes me as like, ooh, that's not a good look.
That's maybe what your bestie's for, or your therapist or your counselor. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or your journal.
Your journal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there is a danger in just putting things out there that are really directed at one person or, maybe even a small group of people. You just offer yourself up for misinterpretation. And was it really worth it? Like, I wish I had saved something I saw this morning. And it talked about how, people who are upset and they seek to hurt others, that's never going to bring you healing. And I think the thing that will bring healing is driving that into a healthier form, meaning write that out in your notes on your phone for sure. I mean, like write it and feel it and really be like, yeah. But then from there, rather than posting it and leaving it to potentially be a dagger to hurt somebody that you don't even intend it to, go to that therapist or call your best friend and vent and get some perspective too. I think that's the dangerous thing too about social media. I know people can comment, and give their perspectives on things, but it takes away accountability in some ways because you can just drop it and leave it, mic drop, and be like, that's my perspective. Whereas the harder thing is to go to a friend who you know is not going to be your yes man and be like, here's what happened, here's how I feel. And for them to go, I can totally see that, and I can totally understand why that upsets you. Have you considered XYZ? Mm-hmm. And that is important to have. Otherwise, we're in an echo chamber, and that's not good.
And I think there's a lot of that happens on Facebook, right? And I'm guilty, right? Of scrolling through and somebody posting something and just love this or, yay you or whatever, and just encouraging whatever it was. Now, it's probably not somebody airing out their dirty laundry. I wouldn't put love this on that. That's not
love
something
that for you.
Yeah, that's not a reaction that I would typically have. I'd probably just scroll on past it and not give it any energy.
Right. I really hate to think that social media might have become someone's only outlet to reach out. Like, that's really, that's a very sad thought to me, because at the end of the day, that person-to-person, face-to-face connection should be the goal, should be the pursuit.
And I feel like that was the original intent of social media, was to help encourage that. What I remember from when Facebook first started, so random Mandee history, my best friend from like middle school and high school left our junior year, and she went off to prep school in New Hampshire. She went to Phillips Exeter Academy, which happens to be where Mark Zuckerberg went to college.
Interesting.
I mean, high school. They went to high school together.
Nice.
Their yearbook was called The Facebook.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so initially, what they were utilizing social media for, what it was an opportunity for like people to get together and study. Like I'm going to be at this study hall from this time to this time working on this. Like, do you want to join me? Or there's a party on the quad, whatever. It was a way to digitally connect to further personal connection off the screen.
Yeah.
And I think it's just as time has, this was 2005, 6?
Right, yeah.
It's been almost 20 years. I think it's evolved to where, we have tiny computers in our hands all the time. And we tend to connect more there and communicate more there than we do face to face. And for me, the interesting context of the pandemic for the last few years is it made me crave this.
Yeah.
Having time face to face with people, being able to touch, being able to like read the emotion in your body, not just see it in your eyes or hear it in your voice through a screen. Like there's something to that.
There is. Yeah.
I don't necessarily know how to put words to it. I'm not the authority on it, but like when someone walks in a room, I can typically feel something from them, whether they're confident or they're nervous or they're happy to be there or they're a little bit reserved.
Yeah.
Like you can feel that.
You can.
And it's easy to mask that on a screen.
Oh, 100%. I mean, because you can be sitting there talking with someone who has their hair done, makeup on, nice top, but they're in their PJs and slippers, that. And so like, that's just kind of a visual illustration of what you see on a computer screen and what's really going on beneath the surface can be two very different things, and often are. And I'm thankful for social media. I really am.
Yeah, me too.
Because thank God for it during the pandemic, because it was the way that people connected, and we saw people connecting in such beautiful ways. I just also think that our skills in communicating face-to-face have suffered a bit, which is funny because right now I'm thinking, man, I sound like my mom, because I'm from the days of like instant message, and that's how Bradley and I met, was on instant message.
Really?
Really, yes. So we talked for months on instant message. He was B Fisher 06 and I was Cute Niffum.
You were what?
Cute Niffum. Niffum is muffin backwards, and my dad... it's a whole thing. We would always
so it was like it was a fun family nickname kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I remember my mom saying, "You just got to put that computer down, because just go talk to them. face to face, or go talk to them on the phone. And I remember as a kid saying, Mom, if it weren't for this allows me to communicate with people that I wouldn't have otherwise because of, whatever reason. I was so shy, so unsure of myself. But I did feel a little more brave sitting in my room, the safety of my room, my space, my little sanctuary. And with that computer, I definitely had a little bit more boldness in things that I would say that I would not have had face to face. And I think there's a place for that. But when Bradley and I met face to face and then we built our relationship, we switched and we had more conversations face to face. I'm very much about taking a self-inventory. And I think if we can stop and maybe ask ourselves, where am I being the most transparent and vulnerable and communicative in my life? And if we think or feel like it's on social media, I just think that presents an opportunity for us to go, ooh, okay, let me pull the reins back and let me see which of my face-to-face, in-person relationships need some tending to and some real communication.
Yeah. I think, when you were talking about being bold on instant message, I completely relate to that because I was in the same kind of, it was new when I was in middle and high school and definitely did some of that. Parents were always worried, that could be a 40-year-old man in Nebraska.
I know.
That was
Chat
always the thing.
Chat rooms were scary places.
Yeah. I didn't spend a lot of time there, but I was mostly talking to people that I knew, except for a few boys across town. That, of course, happened with most teenagers at the time. But I was thinking about something in terms of communication and vulnerability. I have a few thoughts swirling in my head, so this might be messy before it gets better. I'm just warning you. I'm being vulnerable here. One, that vulnerability is actually a strength. It's not a weakness, even though I think a lot of times those two words get equated to each other. And when you're able to be bold behind a computer screen, that's not actually that's not a bold, courageous move. That's more of a bold, weak move because you can exit at any time, right? You can just turn the computer off, walk away.
Yeah.
You're in your safe space. But when it's just an interesting contrast in context. When you're vulnerable with somebody face to face, there's actually courage and strength in that because you're open to the unknown.
Yeah.
You're open to things happening that you might not be prepared for, and you might have to sit in discomfort for a moment before something good happens.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate Brené Brown's work. I've read some of her books and followed her podcast for a while because she talks a lot to that about how there's so much courage and bravery. And she calls it, there's a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that I'm going to not attempt to get correct, but it talks about daring to be great and to be in the arena. If you're not in the arena, can you really speak to that? You know? And I feel like being face to face, person to person is being in the arena.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily going sword to sword as a gladiator, but exchanging thoughts and exchanging feelings and all face to face is a bit like that at times.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about being in the arena, social media has also created a lot of emboldened, opinionated trolls.
Yeah.
Who have no experience in a certain arena, but man, do they have a hell of a bunch of opinions about it. And that is just, again, it's not helpful. It's interesting we're talking about this too because with my Instagram page, The Lippy Lady, and all the lipedema stuff, and my friend Sean, who we have the Lipedema Mamas podcast, we have run into some interesting situations just this week having to do with this. And it's women who are not in that arena, but they're opinionated about it. And the things that they comment, one in particular, we've had just this one person that's like, come on.
That's being negative or hurtful.
Very, very hurtful, and it's not helpful. Okay, great. You articulated your opinion. Who is that helping other than you? And maybe that's the the screen we need to give, like whenever we're really tempted to like comment on something or make a post. Is this helpful, or is it just going to make me feel good, make me feel better? Because if it's just going to like scratch an itch, I would wager to say, just don't.
You know, as somebody who's been in the public eye for a long time, it happens.
Yeah.
And it used to happen on the phone lines at the radio station. And there was a day when kind of a tipping point in my career where we used to be live on the air all the time. And then we had the capability to start recording things in advance so that we could go do other things within the building. That's a whole other conversation for a different time. But what happened on this particular day was I was not live in the studio. And it's because I was working on something else to prepare for a live event. And this guy called in, and he really, he felt like that it was owed to him that he be able to speak to me while I was on the air so that he could say what he needed to say. Like he felt like as a listener, he was owed that. And he was really angry, and he sent a nasty email to me about not being there. And my boss sent him an email back and was like, hey, you have no rights.
Yeah.
This is not your right. She's an employee here. She's doing her job. And by the way, she's a person with feelings.
Yeah, there's a human being
There's a human being you're talking to. And I think that that's the key part that we lose sometimes on social media, especially with public figures.
Yeah.
When we start to have an opinion about their behavior and what they're doing, we lack a lot of context.
Yes.
We only see what they're showing us. My boss told me that 50% of the people are either going to love you or they're going to hate you. Same boss as a public figure.
Yeah.
And the reasons that they might hate you might not be, it's their stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's their stuff whether they love you or hate you, really.
Honestly,
it's a reflection of what's going on within them.
100%.
You're either feeding something they need or you're creating some kind of absence for something that they need.
Which is why I just got to break in and say we can never find our sole purpose and identity in who we present ourselves to be on social media.
No.
You can't find your sense of self, your sense of worth by how many likes, how many followers, if 2 people listen to this podcast, I've got to be okay when I walk out of here. It doesn't define me.
Right.
If 2 people listen or 2 million people, I'm still the same, and I still feel the same way about myself, no matter if it's 2 or 2 million.
Exactly.
Okay, continue. Sorry.
No, I'm just, you're just speaking to and validating what I'm saying is, you know, I've experienced it as a public figure for basically all of my adult life.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of empathy for what you're going through, because the first time that people strike at you, it's really hurtful.
Yeah.
And it's really painful because you're used to be existing in the world of social media where most people exist is a safe place amongst their friends.
Yeah.
There might be a random person who's being a jerk for the day or whatever, but for the most part, you're choosing your friends. But then when you go public and you're putting yourself out there and you're being vulnerable and brave, you're going to have people who are hurting in some way,
Right.
that choose to strike. And I find sometimes it's jealousy, sometimes it's emptiness, sometimes it's loneliness.
Yeah.
It's some kind of pain. However, when I did end up reaching out to that guy, I offered to call him.
Yeah.
And I did. I called him. I did. I called him and I said, hey, I wanted to give you some time.
Wow.
And tell you that I'm sorry that you felt the way that you did, and I was doing my job.
Yeah.
And I know my boss reached out to you, but you wanted to talk to me, so
Here you go.
here I am. And I really love my job, and I'm really thankful that you listened. What did you want to say? And he told me what he wanted to say, but then he also said, I just got to tell you, I had no idea. I didn't have any kind of concept that you had other things that you did aside from talk between the songs on the air. For all I knew, you were there for 4 hours a day and you were gone.
Yeah.
That's my perception. And I said, I do understand that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. He said, I just want you to know now I'm your biggest fan.
And, okay.
Isn't that crazy?
It is, but you didn't have to do that.
No, I didn't.
I would imagine, honestly, probably most people would have been like, screw you, and they wouldn't have.
Well, but he's a human too.
That's the thing. But Mandee, I don't think everybody gets that. I'm serious. I don't think, especially when there's any kind of disconnect, be it, you're on the radio or you're on the other side of that screen, there is a real disconnect that you're talking to flesh and blood who feels, who is going through things, who has their highs, who has their lows. And that piece gets so lost. Like, we're not the authority on communication by any means, but let's pause and remember, you're talking to flesh and blood. You're talking to a person who's in the room, may not be in your room, but you're talking to somebody who's in the room. And would you dare say that to them? And if you would, then the element is, would you just say that in privacy, or would you go and blast it for everybody else to hear too? Because most of the time, we've got the maturity to know we would never go in a room full of 100 people and go, this girl right here is this and this and this and this.
Yeah.
If we have any kind of relationship or any relational equity with that person, which is also an important aspect of this, do you have any relational equity with that person? If you don't, just keep your opinions to yourself. But if you do, go to them. I mean, like, talk to them face to face. Be like, hey, you may not mean to be coming across this way. I just want to let you know that when you say or do XYZ, it makes me feel XYZ. And I think framing it that way will alleviate the potential for like a fuss, because you're not saying, don't go to somebody and say, you're this, or you always do this, but keeping it to, hey, just want you to know you said this or you did this. It made me feel like this. Can we talk about that? Because nobody can really argue with how it made you feel, but it can give them an opportunity to go, I am so sorry. No, what I meant was blah, 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 blah. And I think that's just a better way to go about communicating. I think it's, when we communicate, I feel like my intent is always to create a safe space with whoever I'm with, and to, as much as possible, help them to know that however you're feeling, if you're pissed at me, that's okay. I'm not upset by that. I would love to know why, and I would love to talk it out.
One of my mentors recently taught me something about communication that I think is extremely valuable. And I think this is something that if you're going to write something down, not that you would, but if you are, seek first to understand.
Yep.
Then to be understood.
Yes.
If this is something that is really hurtful, that's good information for me.
Yeah.
To adjust my behavior.
Yeah.
Because I'm certainly flawed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Certainly flawed. And if I'm triggering someone or creating something out there that I'm unaware of, which I have certainly done, then help me understand it so I can be better.
I know I've said it before. My favorite podcast right now is Tim Ross, The Basement, which is interesting that we were talking about vulnerability, because his thing is vulnerability is my superpower.
Yeah.
And he lives from that, and it's so good. But I was listening to one recently, and he was talking about how you can forgive somebody for, if they hurt you or if they said something ugly or whatever. And that does not mean that you have to stay in relationship with them or have that friendship. If all the context and all the history shows that they're just not somebody that brings out the best in you, or they have a history of hurting you, then you can forgive and you can walk away. You can want the best for them. You can sincerely hope all the best things. You don't have to give them your heart. You don't have to be in relationship with that person. And it's okay to be boundary conscious enough to go, I love you, and you gonna stay over there.
So I'm glad you brought up the word boundaries. I was having a really interesting conversation with my best friend the one that went to Exeter, she's now a behavioral psychologist. And we were talking about the difference in boundaries between people of our generation who are like millennials and also kind of in this, she and I are a little bit older than you, kind of in this gap between Gen X and millennials. And then the people that she is mentoring now that are like, what would that be? Gen Z? Is that what we're calling them?
Who are we calling these kids these days?
It was interesting. They have a different level of boundaries on communication with their phones and emails. Like after work, they don't answer work emails. And we were having this interesting conversation about it because she was like, in grad school, she was told she had to get a smartphone so that she could be able to respond to things at any time. And I said, okay, but let's think about the timing of us being at that age and the development of technology. And now those kids have never not had the ability to communicate about work after work.
Yeah.
They've witnessed their parents and everyone in their life. That's been a constant.
Yeah.
So they've learned to create a boundary there.
Which I love to hear, actually.
Right?
And I'm like, ooh, I need to do that.
I'm a little jealous about it.
I need to learn from them.
It reminds me of Kathy saying, the banks close at 5.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about it until it opens on Monday morning. Don't worry over it. I loved it when she said that. I was like,
oh, dang. It's challenging.
Oh, it is challenging, right? But it's a good boundary.
Yeah.
And so when we were talking about it, I was just thinking like, with our peers, our generation, we've seen so much technological change in such a short period of time, and we've adjusted our behavior so much. Like humans have adapted so fast.
Yeah.
Like it's not, these things have not been in our hands for that long.
Yeah.
I think 2008 is when the first iPhone came out. Blackberries were around just a little bit before, but that's like 15 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't remember life before it.
I don't either.
I mean, not on like a daily, like what did I do on a daily basis? Like,
Yeah.
And then I think, okay, yes, I do. I remember getting in trouble from my parents for when I drove somewhere when I was 16, arriving at a house and didn't call.
I remember the same thing.
I didn't have a phone.
Yeah, I
couldn't
There
text.
were just landlines. I was thinking about that too. I remember my dad showing up because I had one of my very best friends I met in second grade in the bathroom, and we're still friends today. And we lived on the same street. She lived 8 houses down from me, and I would rollerblade to her house. But I would forget sometimes to call my dad and be like, hey, I got here safely. It should have taken me about 5 minutes to get there. Well, he would just show up. And I think about that, like, what would people do if you're not home?
Right.
You went home, when you got there, you would check your messages and you would either call if you wanted to or wait until the next day. But people did not have 24/7 access to you. And I
miss those days.
I was about to say, there's a piece of me that really misses that because especially our generation, we do feel, I think, slaves sometimes to that 24/7 clock. Like we do have to be available. And I really love the idea of going, no, you're not going to get me from the hours of 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day.
Yeah.
You don't get me.
I put my phone on Do Not Disturb pretty frequently. And for a while, I felt really guilty about it. And now I just kind of feel like it's that.
Yeah.
It's my opportunity to, when I choose to be notified, when I choose to respond, I can. And I can just put it down and put it away for a little while because I think I'm overstimulated often from it. And so much of like my personal life, but also my professional life deals with digital communication.
Yep.
And talking to people and relationships. And sometimes those lines are a little bit gray, and that's okay because, you become friends with people that you work with and whatnot. But it also, if you don't put up that boundary with clients, for example, if I don't put up a boundary of I'm not going to respond to you after 9 o'clock and I respond to you once. They're going to run over that. Yeah. And then I'm going to start to feel guilty if I don't.
Yeah. Okay. So let's draw this line back to social media. There's a Facebook group like Tyler Rants and Raves where people get on there
That's
and
a whole other scenario. That could be a podcast episode by itself. What people get in there and
what they get after, because the original poster typically will go on to either complain or to rave about a person, a place, a business, whatever. But bless their souls, sometimes what originated as someone trying to complain about an establishment turns into an absolute roast of the poster and of the person who posted. And I ain't gonna lie, because it is drama. Sometimes I'll be reading through those comments and I'm like, oh my gosh. And usually my takeaway is these 150 people have forgotten that the person who posted originally is flesh and blood.
Yeah.
They just start throwing these words out there. A human
experience in person somewhere and chose to share it.
And granted, sometimes people post things and it's like, oh, baby. You should have not done that. You just should have kept your mouth shut.
Yeah, it's an entertaining. I mean, you can spend 4 hours in that group easily.
You can.
And yeah, when I was at the radio station, the most recent time when I was working part-time for them, one of the things that they encouraged us to do was produce local digital articles. So one way that you can find something that is trending locally is to go into that group.
Oh, gosh.
And you sometimes find some really great things, and like one in particular I can think of is a friend of mine's son works at 7 Brew, and he provided outstanding customer service to someone and somebody posted about it.
Which
and
I love.
It was absolutely lovely, the thread that was on there.
Yeah.
But sometimes you get on there and you see, drama and some negative things or just craziness. But what I find often is the people in there that make the comments are the most entertaining.
They are.
That's where the entertainment value is. And that was what I always pulled out into my articles as like quotes.
Yeah.
Was the crazy comments, because people sit there for a minute and they got time to think because they're not face to face. So they got 45 minutes to come up with a zinger. Yep. And man, are there some zingers?
There
in those
are.
comments?
But my heart though, I'm always like, oh God, like the person who posted that originally with zero, like, they had no idea that they were going to become the butt of the joke.
Right.
There's
a reason I've never posted in there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've posted once and it
Maybe
was
a praise, but
it was to praise Tiba Grill.
Oh, yeah, they're amazing.
And their whole, like, everybody was like, oh my gosh, we love them, But I would only post if I felt like that was going to be the thing.
A positive outcome.
Yeah.
There's something that it's been circulating in my mind too that I've been thinking about through this conversation. I was at a conference has it been 2? Yeah, it'll be 2 years ago in October. And we had this really great speaker, and I haven't watched his stuff recently, but I'm going to go watch it after this because it's so lovely. He gave like probably a 60-minute-ish keynote speech. And I think I laughed and cried equally in it. Like, he was so moving. His name is Simon Bailey. And he said something that, like, it's one of those quotes that I just won't forget. And he said, relationships are the currency of the future.
Ooh.
And I think that's why communication is so important because they are. You never know when you are kind to someone and when you develop a relationship with someone, what it's going to lead to. For example, our friendship.
Yeah.
We didn't know when you were photographing me for the radio station in like 15, 16, several years ago. We didn't know that we'd one day do a podcast together. Neither one of us had ever probably considered doing one.
Yeah, were podcasts even a thing at that point?
Oh, yeah. They've been around for a long time.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. The only reason I know is because of my broadcast background. They've been around for about 20 years.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think so.
News to me.
20?
Yeah. But
yeah, roughly.
But you're right. Like, and I even commented to Bradley, I shot a wedding this last weekend, and I often, like, it's our way to have like a date day together, so he'll be my second shooter.
Aww.
And we ran into somebody who was just talking to us about something, and we were talking, and then come to find out he is like kin to another really well-known photographer in town. he had in the wedding had nothing to do with videography, photography, anything. But we walked away and I said, that right there is why you don't ever talk about anybody, because you never know who it is you're talking to.
And who they know.
Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes people just don't know what else to say. That's something too. Like, and I think sometimes, and I think that often comes from an insecurity. People don't know what to say, and so they talk about other people. And I often view that as just their own insecurity. But we gotta get something else to say, y'all, than talking about people. Gossip. I mean, it's just because it doesn't do any good. And for me, if I meet somebody for the first time and they start that, I'm like, you've just told me everything I need to know about you. Not about the person you're talking to me about, but about you. You've just told me what I need to know. Mm-hmm. And we just got to be better than that, like to celebrate women and hopefully to offer a chance to elevate us.
And the conversations that we have.
Yeah. Like, let's be better than that.
This is why I appreciate our friendship. In the conversations that we've had over the years, I can't recall having conversations about other people.
Yeah.
And what they did. I might have shared something like on my heart about about a relationship thing that I was dealing with.
Yeah.
Not gossip, something I personally was dealing with.
As our friendship got deeper, we can talk to one another about, man, this happened and it really hurt, but we're not coming at each other to like,
do you know what so-and-so did?
Yeah, no.
Did you hear about that? We've never had conversations like that. And I think that that's part of why I've been drawn to you, is because I would rather talk about ideas, maybe current events, or, philosophical thoughts. Like, I mean, I know that sounds really like high-handed or whatever, but like thoughts about social media and how it's affecting us, like things like that, things that you and I talk about on the podcast are honestly the things we talked about over coffee and lunch.
Yeah. It's literally how we walked in here and was sipping on coffee, and that's what started. We started talking about that, and then we're like, ooh, turn the mics on.
Right. Yeah. And so I agree. I think to the point of celebrating women and elevating the conversation, it's letting go of the desire to talk about so-and-so and what's going on with them, and to have a more meaningful conversation.
And that's more vulnerable. It's a shield too for some people to let me get the attention on anybody else but me. Mm-hmm. And whether you are talking with someone that you've known for a day or you've known for 10 years, make it, about more than just, I don't know.
Yeah.
That. Because we can do better than that. And we're going to feel so much better when our conversations revolve around substance and not about tearing anybody down, even in small ways. I love, there's that quote, or like, a good friend will fix the other friend's crown without letting everybody else know that it's crooked.
Yeah.
Like, we've all, I think, probably had that experience with someone who really, in an effort to make themselves feel better, they tried to make us look really bad. Like publicly, like from across the room. Oh, girl, you got a huge thing of spinach in your teeth, but let me help. And you're like, thanks so much for that, for letting 50 people know. Versus the one who will come through the crowded room to your ear, say, hey, you've got something in your teeth. I'm just looking out for you.
Yeah.
That is.
Or do you want to join me in the ladies' room?
Yes. I mean,
where you have an opportunity to like really get in there and see it. and you're not like picking at your teeth in front of a group of people hiding behind a napkin.
Yes. And again,
there's ways.
There are ways. There are ways.
Ladies.
And I'm going to tell you again, you let people know the type of person you are by how you handle these situations, be it on social media, be it in person. Be the person that you would hope, like...
What's the golden rule?
Yeah.
Treat others the way you want to be treated?
Yes. Yeah. we're probably going to have a lot more discussions on this, on just communication in general, because it's such a multifaceted topic and we can go in so many different directions. But I think today it was just like, again, looking at
the surface.
Yeah. Just crack it open a little bit. Let's start the conversation, and so.
Maybe we'll have somebody come on with some more authority to speak to tools.
Yeah. Because I really think in general.
I have some ideas.
Yeah. In general,
I think you do too.
Bad communication typically happens when people lack a tool to communicate better. They're doing the best they can, or they're just not thinking about it. But so today, maybe the first little crack in the surface is be mindful.
Yeah. Have some self-awareness. 2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah.
I know you got 2 hands, but maybe use them to observe and scroll as opposed to those thumbs. Use your fingers. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where I'm going with that, but I think we're going to wrap this up.
Coffee.
Yeah, we're going to wrap this one up.
Bye.
Bye.
The Celebrating Women podcast wants to hear from you. Email us a voice message to celebratingwomenpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to hear your story or the story of an incredible woman you know. Become part of the conversation on social media. Facebook.com/Celebrating Women Podcast. On Instagram, search Celebrating Women Podcast. The Celebrating Women Podcast has been presented by Hand and Stone Massage and Facial Spa in Tyler, Texas. Book your appointment today. Stop by the spa in Cumberland Shopping Center or online at handandstonetyler.com. The Celebrating Women Podcast is created and hosted by Mandee Montana and Ashley Fisher. Support the show for as little as $3 per month at celebratingwomenpodcast.buzzsprout.com or visit our show notes. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Celebrating Women Podcast.